Yeah.
I think we probably should.
Yep.
People keep coming in. Get started. So happy to see you all today. Welcome everybody to today's Critical Issues China program. And again, thank you for joining us. We are so thrilled about today's talk about digital currency and China's strategy around digital competition. We have one of the world's real experts on China's digital sector, Winston Wenyan, who has written many books on the subject. And we're delighted that we have more than 100 people tuned in online as well. So wonderful to have a great audience. I am Linda Elliott. I'm the Executive Director of the Fairbanks Center for Chinese Studies. And I always like to reinforce this, that our mission is to support scholarship around China. And in the current increasingly anti-China environment here in the United States, we believe more than ever in the importance of open dialogue and discussion. And though it's tough these days because of the increasingly difficult domestic pressures in China, we will continue to strive to bring both Western and Chinese voices to our Harvard audience so that we can study today's challenges from all angles. The speaker series was founded by the late Professor Ezra Vogel, as you know, who believed so deeply in the idea of intellectual exchange, and inspired by that vision, we invite speakers from all corners to share their insights on the latest in China. So before we dive into today's program, I wanted to give a little plug for a few upcoming talks as well. So I hope you all come to those too. Next Wednesday, we have Jessica Chen White from Cornell, who's going to be talking about the dangers of U.S. zero-sum competition with China. And the week after that, we are delighted that we have Professor Yating Guo from Peking University, who's going to be talking about how China views U.S.-China competition. So on the program, digital and technology competition seems to be right smack in the middle of the shifting U.S.-China relationship. And so we are especially looking forward to learn more about this today from two of the world's great thinkers on this subject. I'd now like to introduce our moderator, Professor Yao Lei, who is an associate professor in the Department of Sociology at Harvard University. And Professor Lei is also the author of an upcoming book called The Gilded Cage, Techno-State Capitalism in China. So she's done some very deep research on how the economy is operating these days in China. So Professor Lei will introduce our speaker, Winston Ma, who is an investor, attorney, author, and adjunct professor at the Global Digital Economy. So over to you, Professor Lei, and thanks for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining.
Can you put the mic closer to your mouth? Thanks.
Well, thank you for joining us for today's opening. We are very honored to have Mr. Winston Ma today. And as Dina mentioned, that Mr. Winston Ma is an investor, attorney, author, and education professor at one World School. And he is the co-founder and managing partner of Cross-Leaf Venture. So actually, and for 10 years, he was the managing director and head of the owner of the China Investment Corporation, which is a operating on wealth funds that manages part of the foreign. Prior to that, Mr. Garland's investment manager and the owner lawyer and practice both in China. And he has published 8 books on excellent digital economy China online. And I just also get with years and really new practices. And he really has experience in terms of how he did actually in both China and Japan. And today, Mr. Ma is going to talk about blockchain and digital currency and the policies of the party controversy with China segments. It's an incredibly timely and important topic. And now, without further ado, I'm going to turn the time over to Mr.
Thank you very much. And it's really great to be back here. Well, I said be back because about 7, 8 years ago, I did an executive education here at Harvard. by the Kennedy School and also the business school. When I was a young global leader at Davos, so they had this program. I spent like 2 weeks here, and with this classroom similar to this. So I hope that they will not be too nervous. But anyway, so it's really good to be here. Even though we talk about tech race today, right? I would say, essentially, myself and probably many of the people here in this room, we are all beneficiary of U.S.-China synergies. It's, definitely in my case, right? Last decades. I had my undergrad in semiconductor physics program back in China, in Shanghai. But from there, I got legal education both at Fudan and NYU School. And from there, I had a 10-year Wall Street lawyer banker experience in New York. Started with David Spoke and then taking more than about that in New York. Sort of thing. If you recall, at the turn of the century, that was the boom of the Chinese companies listing in the US. Right? And then 2008, I moved back to China because CIC, China Investment Corp, set up. It makes global investments with China's foreign reserve. Right, started with $300 billion, now it's like $1 trillion institution making global investments. And most importantly, after a few years in Beijing, I was made the head of North America office to cover U.S. markets and Canada for a few years. And during that time, I set up a vehicle in Silicon Valley, got into mobile internet companies very early, like community Twitch, investing into Twitch before it was sold to Amazon, things like that. That was all like a good old days, right? And after 10 years of CIC, I moved back to New York, still being keenly on the China topics, and still hope like through the institutions like the Fairbank Center, here with the leadership of Linda, right, we can still work together to continue that US-China synergies. And I think that's really sort of the background of this thing. So when we talk about this US-China tech race right now, right, it's useful to think about the context. Think about last decade. For China's digital economy, it started with 2CC. Right? It started with C2C, copy to China. Now, because if you think about the beginning of the Chinese tech companies, right? Alibaba was known as China's version of eBay. Of course, everyone remembers that. Alibaba has expanded into so many different areas across all different sectors, and now the fastest growing sector for Alibaba is cloud. And when you think about Tencent, it started as a gaming company, right? And it was known as like the China version of the Messenger, or China's version of Facebook, right? So now it is also in chips and autonomous driving. But before they even come into this kind of the hard tech, cutting edge technology side, they actually copied the US side and made the mobile economy even better. And that's why the 2Cs, right? At the end of last decade, Chinese companies have become so big. They had the largest internet population in the world, 1 billion users, and most importantly, same culture, same language, and integrated by mobile payment. So this is a tremendously powerful ecosystem to test new mobile applications. That's why at the end of last decade, right, the Chinese internet companies are already ahead of mobile applications. And then that's why you see Facebook trying to copy TikTok in terms of short video applications, etc. Right? And most importantly, because of the 1 billion user network integrated by the mobile internet, mobile payment, people do everything on these platforms every day, leaving tremendous amount of data on these platforms, right? Which also triggered the data-driven economy in China, turning the internet companies into the data-oriented tech company. Right? They started as internet commerce companies, but now they're becoming data-driven tech companies. And that's sort of the context of today's US-China tech race. So when did this happen? When did this happen? And to me, I'm a good chess player, kind of a fan, right? So to me, this is the beginning of the this transition. From China copying internet application business models into China competing US on technologies. Anyone know who this person is? Very easy. Name is on that screen. Good, yeah. The new one plays Weiqi. You're right? Yeah, right. So best human player for the Go chess game in the world, right? Now, why is this important? Because 2017, this was a historical match. Because before that, no one believed that machine can master Go chess. This is a very kind of oriental game, black and white chessboards, 361 chess blocks. And supposedly it has so many variations. The number of variation exceeds the total number of atoms in the universe. So consider that. And so before that, no one believed that machine can understand this game, let alone beat the best human player, right? But actually, they did this game, 3 games, full of metaphor. Right? You can say it's intuition versus machine. Or you can say this kind of the ancient versus modern. Right? You can say you can say it's a human versus machine. But most importantly, the image about US versus China, because the best human player is from China, and the AI from Google. Right? It's an AI lab called the MapMind. So what's the end? The end result is the best human player fight. It's a 0-3 straight loss. But most importantly, he said, I can only understand half of the plays by the machine, right? So it's obviously a shock to the Go chess community, but most importantly, it's a shock to the China internet community, right? Before that, they were very happy that they copied the US and they did better, right? But now they realize actually this is the kind of the second half of the mobile internet economy, from internet business models into data technologies. So it's all just like almost like overnight. All the internet companies say we want to do technology. Right? So Alibaba, started its push into cloud business, just like Amazon, or Tencent, set up a committee saying that we'll go into all the tech sectors. Like we're not a gaming company, and then Alibaba even set up a research institute, like some probably heard about it, right? The DAMO research institute saying we are a tech company, we're a tech company. But most importantly, China government took action. And it says, maybe a coincidence, but within 3 months, in the summer of 2017, China come up with the AI policy. Say we're gonna have like more than 100 universities to have AI major. We say we're gonna pick Chinese companies to be the champions for AI in different directions. And then there will be government level push to promote AI research and development at the national level as well as the province level, right? Most importantly, said by 2030, China will be the dominant AI leadership in the world. That was sort of the statement from the government. And why 12 years? Why, that was 2017, right? Why 12 years? China will become the leading AI kind of country in the world. No one knows. But they want to set a goal. Because you are more likely to achieve a goal if you set it. So randomly, let's say 2030, we're going to be number one AI. That's it. But you see the commitment, right? You see the commitment. So that's very important background as we talk about the US-China tech race today. Yeah. So today, it's not only about AI, right? It's about this general concept of all tech. hard tech. This is about every kind of new technologies that are on the horizon. It started with the China government report 2021 last year to say we're going to increase R&D spending by more than 7% every year, and then they listed a number of technologies as major breakthrough technologies. Again, these are the technologies on the horizon. So it's no longer about copying and do better. It's about we see the technologies coming, in the horizon. So let's set ourselves to invest, research, develop, and to be the leader in these breakthrough technologies. And this is reflected during the pandemic in connection with the stimulus, right? If you recall, China had a massive stimulus this time, just like 2008 financial crisis time. But the huge difference is 2008, the stimulus was mostly about traditional infrastructure, like toll roads, high-speed trains. Now, the new infrastructure in connection with the pandemic stimulus are 5G networks, data centers, cloud computing infrastructures. So you can see this broad push and this broad mindset from the China government. And this is very important for us to understand in this kind of tech race. In China, you have very top-down macro thinking industry policy, right, versus the US, which is more which is more left to the free market. But we will get to that toward the end of the presentation. We'll find interesting. The US is doing something very similar to China these days. So just to summarize what I just said, last couple of years I published a 5-year book series on China's tech revolution, and the book titles, the evolution of the book title actually reflecting that in China ecosystem. 2016 is the title of China's mobile economy. So if you think about 2016, the keywords were smartphones, mobile payment, and e-commerce. That was 2016 keyword. And then 2021, I published the tech digital war, how China's tech power shapes the future of AI, blockchain, and cyberspace. The keywords become data, intelligence, and hard technology. So that's the evolution last decade. Now, let's look into blockchain and crypto and digital currency as kind of a vertical, right? Let's dive in a little bit to see how this play out right now. How this play out. Right? Now, it's interesting because when we talk about blockchain, people's first reaction is China prohibits crypto trading. That's most of people's reaction. Right? But in reality, China is the first major country to announce that blockchain is a critical technology. In 2019, President Xi called blockchain a critical technology. That was the first major country leadership to make a statement like this relating to a blockchain, which is a high but not fully proven technology, right? On my scale. So that one was quite different. So when you look at China, it's a very bifurcated picture. On one hand, China promotes blockchain technology. At the same time, China limits or even prohibits crypto mining, trading, and transactions. Right now, what's really interesting is before this kind of crackdown in 2021, China used to be the #1 crypto country. So China used to be responsible for more than 70% of global crypto mining. In remote places, lots of energy supply and space from coal and from water were a great environment for crypto mining. And also China has been the biggest manufacturer of mining equipment in the world. So when you look at the mining chips, mostly coming from Chinese companies, some of them listed on NASDAQ. And also for trading, same thing. And they used to be account for like the majority of the global trading of crypto. But with all that, the government had the determination to say, this is it. We're not promoting crypto trading. Actually, we are focusing on technology. So forget about crypto trading. So last year, it started a series, really serious enforcement to comprehensively prohibits crypto mining, trading, and the transaction. But at the same time, now this is really interesting, 2021, China's government accelerated the push for blockchain technology developments. So around the similar time, May 2021, China's Ministry of Industry, MIIT, Ministry of Information and IT, they outlined proposals, for the deep integration of blockchain and the economy. And what they want to see is blockchain startups. Actually, they literally say they want to see unicorns coming out of blockchain industry to connect blockchain technology with the real economy, whether it's manufacturing industry or whether it's financial industry. They want to see the real economy application between blockchain and industries. And at the same time, government is also using the blockchain technology to create the digital currency that to compete with the US dollar supremacy. In this space, China is way ahead. Way ahead than the US and than any other major economies, right? Because China is the only country that has done mass scale testing of digital currency across different applications. No other countries are as close. And with that, you can relate to today's metaverse talk, right? It's very similar. Like in the US, you see most of the metaverse Web3 discussion relates to the future of the internet to be decentralized or to be based on crypto. But in China, the metaverse talk is more about the 3D immersive interactive internet, like AR, VR technology, data transmission technology, and for applications on that kind of platform, most likely it will be China's CNY, the China's sovereign digital currency, instead of cryptos coming from public blockchains. So this bifurcation you will see this bifurcation in the metaverse. You will see China focus on the technologies relating to metaverse, but it will prohibit the usage of crypto decentralization in that kind of metaverse. So we bifurcated. Now, it just by chance today, like last night China time, MIT and a few ministries come out with another announcement. They say this is a policy about promoting virtual reality technologies into real economy. And they try to see by 2026, there will be mass scale application of virtual technologies in China's real economy. And they hope that the virtual reality economy will reach 350 billion renminbi. That's like what, $50 billion by 2026. Why 2026? Why 50 billion? No one knows, right? These guys in Beijing, they just pick up numbers. But again, it's more likely to achieve the goal if it's different. So now this race is coming. Now we come to the race, right? So with this application, you can see the race. Here in the US, you have Google, Facebook, NVIDIA. These are the typical metaverse companies in the US. They have started this metaverse standards forum. They're going to sort of try to create this cross-platform standards so that people can travel through the metaverse across the different platforms, whether it's Meta, whether it's NVIDIA, whether it's Google, so on and so forth. And you will notice, very few Chinese companies are involved there. Frankly, I don't know why Huawei there, but Huawei is a so this is kind of the US side of things, right? But the China side of things, they have to think completely from the business perspective. Because the government says, because there's no more like a crypto play there, no more crypto there. But I think it's important to mention that this doesn't mean that you will not see innovation from the Chinese metaverse ecosystem. Because in terms of like a mobile payment, right, no other country that as close to China, cashless or mobile payment for it. And in terms of like online entertainment, especially related to AR, VR, China is also the biggest kind of entertainment market. And the Tencent is the largest gaming country in the world. And then most importantly, you also have to deal with small hardware. So made in China manufacturing is still an advantage, even though we are moving from import-export economy to a digital economy. Actually, made in China is a super big advantage for small hardware companies to test and adjust their technologies as they develop the next generation AR metaverse technologies, right? So the difference here is they are focused on the technologies. They are mostly dealing with the hardware and the data side. But for a lot of the US metaverse startups, they put a lot of focus on the crypto side. A lot of times they engage VCs for equity investments, but at the same time they still issue tokens for financing. So it's a very different kind of approach. So you could even say the US startups focus more on the financial natures. The Chinese startups focusing on technology aspect of the project. So now with that, what's next? What's next? It's very important when you look at Party Congress the 20th Party Congress, and you see all the things we just talked about in the example of blockchain and the metaverse are reflected here. So you can see all these kind of similar ideas will play out in the next decade. So if you look at the speech of the 20th Party Congress, a few very important keywords there, but they're all related to this concept of geo circulation. In the past, it's mostly about import-export, so it's mostly about global market circulation. But now, a lot more focus will be put into domestic circulation. But frankly, it's not that dramatic. It's not that, to put this into context. When I was a first-year associate, they spoke 20 years ago. Actually, the M&A lawyers in the US, they have no idea about cross-border investments because they don't have to. Because the US M&A market alone at that time was the biggest M&A market in the world. So if you talk about internal circulation, the US market was very much internal circulation, right? So don't think too negatively about this dual circulation. But anyway, so a few very important key terms there. Security, right? So when you think about the blockchain crypto case and data security, so the BDC is not on public blockchain like Ethernet. It's on a blockchain network developed by China. And the financial systems theory say there's only one currency. Don't tell me you want to make blockchain, Bitcoin, a legal tender. For the China financial system, I don't want to see any crypto-led instability, right? Things like that. And then independent innovation. This again, try to be independent from the US technology, right? So you can imagine for AI, semiconductor technologies, there will be a lot of push for domestic development so that we will not be quote choked by US technologies. And then the third one is about real economy. And this also relates to prohibiting crypto trading. It's focused on the blockchain application in the real economy, but we restrict crypto trading, right? Focus on the real economy. And for metaverse, same thing. Instead of thinking about metaverse entertainment, but instead of thinking about issuing tokens for gaming, focus on the metaverse experience, VR technology. And so these are the keywords. And as I come to the end of the presentation, right? I think that these are really the keywords we should keep in mind as we look into the coming decade about the U.S.-China tech race. The China's focus, security, independent innovation, real economy. So semiconductor is the big case here. So I'll quickly go through here. Because I spent time in the sovereign wealth fund circle, right? So to show the commitment, to show the commitment to promote the R&D of chips, China set up a dedicated sovereign fund, 30 billion fund, specifically to invest in the semiconductor sector. And then the name is very obvious. It's called the big funds. And the investment they made, become very interesting case studies of U.S.-China tech race. The most important case, Smith, semiconductor manufacturing international company in Shanghai. And that's interesting. It's called international because what happened is it can no longer become an international company. Because, as I said, right, China set up the semiconductor fund. So Smith used to be a company, in Shanghai, and then 2020, the semiconductor, the big fund, made a big investment into it, with the Shanghai local sovereign fund. They put more than $2 billion into this company, and then it was listed on the Shanghai Stock Board, which is like the Chinese the NASDAQ thing. So the company's valuation went up all-time high. So that was the good part, right? But of course, the tricky part was, the funding, the big funds investment was announced on the same day that Huawei was put on the sanction list by Trump. So it's almost like they tried to beef up the SMIC to create some alternative supply to Huawei. Right? At least people may make that connection. So then you see this, the US side takes that. The first, the US Commerce Department puts a SMIC on this entity list so that SMIC cannot easily get technologies, they cannot access technologies in the global market. And then December 2020, another list, right? This is the Defense Department. And they puts this is about the stock. So they put the SMIC stock on the stock ban list. The implication of that is no US investors can put money into that company, put money into that company. But it's a military list. So as a result, foreign investors had to pull out. And then the company also got delisted from all US exchanges. And to make sure that no US investors will accidentally invest into this company, there's some of the major indexes, stock indexes like MSCI, but they remove the stock from the index. So when institutional investors invest in those index products, they will not accidentally put money into SMIC, right? So huge separation. Now, and that was kind of the Trump time thing. And now the Act 2 is the CHIPS Act. Now, the Biden administration continues this reaction, and more importantly, instead of just try to mess up with the Chinese company, they do something on our own. So the CHIPS Act is about putting investment into the U.S. semiconductor ecosystem. So it tries to promote R&D of semiconductor in the U.S. And they try to set up supply chain in the U.S. So for example, a joint venture with TSMC, with TSMC of Taiwan. This joint venture has started in Arizona. So try to move some of the manufacturing capacity into the US, right? And also the last point, the CHIPS Act also made it more specific about limiting foreign companies, from taking US companies expansion. So what I mean, is like, in the past, Intel, may set up a joint venture or wholly owned subsidiary in China to develop R&D capabilities, right? Using Chinese talents, what have you. But now these days, you say, actually for US companies to expand into foreign countries, mostly probably means China, they have to get the government approval. Quite a big movement. And this is a very big change from the Trump time. Because the Trump time, it was mostly about defensive. Maybe China capital tried to acquire a Silicon Valley semiconductor company. And then you have a kind of multi-agency set up in Washington, D.C. called the CFIUS, Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., led by the Treasury Department. And the CFIUS will review the deal, and if they feel that the potential acquisition may have national security issues, they can block the deal, so they can prevent from Chinese capital buying U.S. technologies. So during the Trump time, it was mostly about the defensive, blocking Chinese investments, block China's acquisition of technologies, remove them from the U.S. capital markets, delist them, kind of messed up with the companies. Right? But now the CHIPS Act, as we saw here, right? They actually become more offensive, right? We say, we should develop our own research, the competition, and in the competition will limit the technology transfer to China. So when you look at this, you'll find US China actually become quite similar. Now, China is very consistent in its sort of own thinking. So, government-led, big picture innovation policy, and then the economy and the Chinese companies will follow. Right? And after the 20th Party Congress, because of the concern of security, independent innovation, and the focus on real economy, those policies will continue. And maybe even reinforced. And for the US, interestingly, they're taking some lessons from China. So in some ways, say, you do that, I have to do that too. So in the US, you still have the private market to lead it, but the government is also, to some extent, in some areas, start to set industry policy, start to set up the sovereign capital to promote the research. So it's really interesting when you look at the Biden when he started, right? Instead of like to say that was Trump, let's reconcile. In fact, at the very beginning, 2021 February, Biden already made an executive order to expand domestic production semiconductor and try to move the supply chain to China, to the US. And then for China, obviously, it will continue. And after the Party Congress, that policy direction will be even more and more focused. What I'm saying. So we summarize this as this is my summary: U.S. market-driven innovation, mostly by private companies, but it also starts to use national industry policy and the sovereign capital vehicles to promote specific industry development. And in China, it will continue to set innovation policy, and they keep creating new terms, right? Last decade was information consumption, digital China, internet plus, and now the new terms will be independent chips, independent innovation, the intelligence plus instead of internet plus, now the term is intelligence plus. And for broad industries, the term is going to the cloud, the aggregating data, and the developing intelligence. That's the term from NDRC for broad industry digital transformation. Yeah, so that's sort of the new era we're going to have to put that book to consider on the huntable unicorns is about cyberpunk company UBC. And the digital war is to say, at the same time, when sovereign capital are pushing innovation, they are also in a fight to try to protect their technologies and slow down the other side's acquisition of technology. And the blockchain Web3 is look at the metaverse, looks like the new frontier of this US-China tech race. So the next decade will be very interesting, and I'm pretty sure that the industry center will be busy with it. Yeah, so I stop here. Yes.
Just take. So, my training is in sociology and scholar, and for social science, one of the most difficult questions is to what extent actual industrial policy works. And under sometimes certain conditions, it works. So China has been doing this at least since 2000. And then there are some successful stories, and there are also some that are crazy. Doesn't work for those this area experiences. So I would like to ask Winston about kind of your observation into your investment experiences, your observation in which cases like specific industry policy works in China and why you certain person and the adjustment. And so compare the kind of and then I'm interested in how to evaluate some US industrial policy as we know that so in the past there are a lot of economies in the US and they actually made policy in the US they really resist the industrial policy now act and how to evaluate US. Do you see sometimes you see things are having converged, but then I'm wondering do you see any difference in terms of the US deal industrial policy? How do you think the future and to what extent the US policy would work? So that's a question about industrial policy. And my second question about how domestic also geopolitical factors influence on the development technological development in China and also the race. So domestically, so as we know, you kind of mentioned like crackdown people, at least shows of them all the government to deal with the blockchain. And also we know very well that traditionally the government has actually shifted the way they regulate sectors. So for a lot of people, this institutional environment really concerns in China. And also you mentioned about digital currency. And so similarly, one thing about development to currency in China, we also have to be in a relationship with China government and also China is the and how this kind of the relationship between the Chinese government and also China take influence the technological development is then the value that Alibaba and also Tencent actually restore. So there is some kind of competition and also cooperation between these technological companies and the Chinese government. And a lot of people also, like my founding at Harvard, JPM, and most some companies, they actually question, like to what extent this kind of top-down approach can really, would that kind of undermine the innovation that's a very popular argument as well. So this kind of domestic factor, this kind of environment, uncertainty, competition, collaboration between the companies and Chinese government, how do you factor this into the future development of China's tech sector? And also, you also mentioned, and also the geopolitical factor. So even like it not only kind of concentrating investment in China company, but also concentrating America. And now I think Americans are part of some companies. And then how this kind of, and also there is that eventually was the cloud, Alibaba and Tencent all the way in some part of the world, at least some part of the world, but not every part of the world. You have a big market, so I want to kind of share the use of as a big factor and also kind of geopolitical factor influence things happening in China and also in China. Wait, so I think I just stopped here because I actually continue.
The industry policy is very interesting because it's almost like a story. But in the current context, we get the mixed results. But it's from the last decade, global internet from perspective, China's industry policy was a tremendous success. So they started in 2013 with this policy concept, information. And frankly, I didn't even understand that concept when it first started. But as I got into tech investing and then people and global economy, I sort of gradually to understand that concept. The information consumption needs information technologies for consumption, and the traditional product export economy last decade into consumption-driven economy. But it was also about consumption of information products, right? So the last decade was also this development of online payment, making China's largest payment market. But then also the information consumption, it also needs to develop information technology to kind of upgrade, consumption upgrade using information technology. So that policy actually proved to be very successful in last decade. Well, in the last decade, for the majority of Chinese people, they don't have, they never had a PC. For a lot of people, the first connection with the internet was the time they got a smartphone. But when China promoted the smartphone and was forming at the same time, build up the 4G network across the country, China's internet, the mobile internet population grew from 0 to 1 billion. So, and then from that, we have very robust mobile e-commerce. So from that perspective, it's very successful. But for the semiconductor fund, you got to make the results. The big fund has not done that well. If they had done very well, China should have lots of the breakthrough by now. Instead, that only 2 months ago, we saw all the senior guys of the big fund got arrested for bringing. Right. Most of the part, the big fund focused on secondary market trading, buy and sell stocks of existing companies instead of molding real development. Right? So you can expect that the big fund will go through some restructuring. But I think the government was still the industry policy is relevant. And I think they will try to make it better. One, I think they try to have develop private collaboration. If it's only government supports and getting to corruption, getting to governance issues, that's also that's done. But two, they will feel like when they set up industry policy, maybe they should get market feedback, especially like really difficult sector like semiconductors. The policymakers are not the expert, very hard to come up with proper policy. The third attitude, I think they may think they can do a better job forward because they have more data. It's, the whole economy is being digitalized, so the government will have access to a lot of data. If with that, they can develop smarter policy. So, policy, we get some other feedbacks.
So now this is over the field to research the research lab and then bring sales. Talk about three questions first.
Yeah, I'm from South Korea. The last time I visited Beijing was in early 2020. I did some surveys about the rising US-China rivalry. Even at the time, when I asked about my Chinese counterparts there, they were not afraid at all. Actually, they think that, let's do this fight. Actually, they've been quite involved. Actually, they're quite motivated. Things are coming and we should do this to become the #1 country in the world, and US is the final obstacle they're blocking to growing China's rise, and we should not avoid it. But 2 years have passed, and does it, what's your sense that the Chinese fighting spirit is it still there, or is it kind of subsided a little bit for the last 2 years in the pandemic period? And I also visited the Huawei headquarters in Shenzhen and also R&D center in Beijing.
Are you from the semiconductor industry?
Oh, I do everything about China. At the time, the vice president of Huawei told me that when US is trying to constrain us, we'll probably suffer for the next 3 years. But then no problem at all. We'll rise again. The same fighting spirit. So that was like 2 years ago. What's the current situation? Where's the spirit of the rising power? Is it still there? Thank you.
Because I haven't, even for me, traveling back to China is a difficult thing. So especially since pandemic, I haven't traveled back. So I cannot really tell an underground sentiment. So the WeChat groups are supplying big data. I think it's kind of because on one hand, the China market is over internet economy. Very important. You have 1 million users. So what else may grow? So they have to think about the Google market. And so I think that the spirit of we need to continue to go out and occupy and holding on to the US. It is still there in the middle of all this. The Congress liable to, I don't know, it started US Act months ago. That's why out, right? But it seems like the trend is still there. So that's one part. But for the another part, for semiconductor chipsets, especially with the setback that we found, I think people got more realistic. I mentioned my undergrad was, so I never thought it's easy because it was easy. And my classmates designed from the big companies and started their own companies, just like with AI or electric cars, but they didn't. because this is a very alarming difference. So I think in terms of chips, etc., the people are more or less the time it's more difficult than this. They never had an underwriting. So. Well, what do you think?
Questions?
Yeah,
Let's go.
yes.
Thanks for being here, Winston. So this is Winston from your business school and also from China. So I have two questions. The first one is, to what extent do you think the ECN1 will help China to challenge US dollar supremacy? And the second question is, do you think the CBDC, central bank digital currencies, will replace the other side currencies? Thank you.
So the first one, I say it will take time. With China's mass scale testing was mostly in the United States. So they tested the CBDC with the ECNY of China with foreign currencies during the Winter Olympics, but it was a small scale effect. So for global cross-border payment with ECNY, it has not really started. They only started with a few countries. You probably have seen news reports that for 40 days, the China Central Bank, together with a few other countries, mostly Middle East and South Asia, to have this digital currency bridge for cross-border payment testing for 40 days. They said it was a successful thing. So if that becomes successful, if we can significant, even though it's going to take time to be in a position to challenge the overall US dollar systems, but even in the regional context, it can be very, very significant. If you think about China is the biggest oil buyer from the Middle East. The Middle East buys a lot of consumer goods from China, and they naturally will see, why do we need the US dollar? Why do we have to use this system? Why do we have to use the external system that will charge a lot of fees, right? A lot of cost? Let's just do it. Let's just do it. So I think naturally we may see these regional networks emerge, and then it will take quite some time for the Chinese currency to challenge the US dollar as overall global payments as well as reserve currency. So that's the first one. The second one is relating to your point about the private kind of thing. So it's quite obvious that China is focusing on its sovereign currency. I suggest you the white paper of the Chinese Central Bank released last summer. Within that answer would be interesting to be its conclusion. The China Central Bank's conclusion is that the private virtual currencies, as well as the stable currencies, stable currencies are a special case of closed solution. Stable banks. The conclusion was that the China Central Bank made the conclusion that cryptos are not good for two reasons. One is it is the inconvenience of the transaction process, high cost of money. And then the second part is the sort of the financial system risk, financial systems. And again, the US side does not take that approach, but it is now acting a very similar approach. Central Bank, the Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell, right? He also made a statement that crypto is not good for payments. And for Treasury Department Yellen, almost every month she will only statements. So yeah, so interestingly, the US doesn't want to say they want to behave like China, but it opposed to the and I think that's quite interesting because for both countries, they want to keep their currency as a primary currency in global finance, and more importantly, they want to defend it against the challenges
Well, thanks, Winston. Very informative. I took so much notes. It's such a wealth of information. So I want to ask you a question. Yeah, international lawyer. I wonder. The CHIPS Act is clearly a domestic act, right? But it pertains so significantly to other actors, other countries and companies, Asian companies as well. So what's the legal basis of this behavior, and whether there are precedents in the international law and global governance areas that can help mitigate the transition, or are there efforts by international lawyers, economic and finance technology lawyers that they may try to come up with something that these tech race between the two powers are not damaging too many people, too many companies, and the collateral damage can be managed. So the bottom line is the international, the law aspects and the multilateral aspects of the industrial policy of the tech race. Thank you.
Really great. Again, school studies. They have policies. So the kind of approach is not very different from the approach taken by Southeast Asia countries. Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, they all have their own version, national policy, digitalizing their countries. A different kind of name. Thailand with Thailand 4.0 or something. And then Malaysia is digital Malaysia. They set up a national version called NBC, Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation, things like that. So that part, maybe Asia, right, is quite similar. The West, in the West, especially Europe, they take a different approach. Right? So they believe in free market. China EU investment treaty got stuck, right? Supposedly it should be voted last year, but did not. But if they got voted, and one key concept there is mutual competition, competitive neutrality. Competitive neutrality is that to limit government's interference in the private market. But for the same reason, we can see that US coming closer to China, Europe cannot put it together. The best example is during the pandemic, the the European Commission, they started this initiative that said, we need our tech champions, right? They said, the US, you have Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, right? China has Tencent, Alibaba, Baidu, etc. We reported, right? Most of the EU data is on the cloud of US companies. Most of the new data is on the cloud of Amazon. So they have a national security concern as well. But more importantly, they say we need our own tech champions. So we should come up with 100 billion sovereign fund EU to promote tech investing and development. So they made that ask. And the immediate reaction from Europe is like, well, it was not about where you can invest, it was like, where would you get some money? Because and not surprisingly, 2 years, we didn't see any new sovereign fund to promote tech development. I mean, would you call that industry policy? I would say yes, right? But they just did not have the institutional setup to do that. So back to your question, I don't think going forward in the international law context, maybe under the WTO framework, or maybe under some other multilateral treaty framework, the EU maybe the place that will start some litigation, some arbitration, some disputes relating to industry subsidies. maybe the chip industry would be the first to be with this license. Yes, please. There's time to work basically for finding the synergy before and especially as one of the alumni of that university. Yeah. Yeah, I'm visiting here. Was on the project of blockchain-based international leading facilitation platform. My name is James Shu. My question has to do with the three bullet point you shared with us about who's 20th. 15. So the number 3 is about really common. So can you talk a little bit about it? In the sense that kind of shift of industry policy is not the agent, and the notion of need of the more physical economy rather than digital economy, more use rather than service, at least physically delivered service. So with that in mind, did it have any impact about us finding a synergy in terms of who do what, like now? We do manufacturing services. In the everything as a service world, service is an integral part of everything. So, but that turns the US, China kind of dependency or the company. I think the future is decoupling because Adams says we need to take advantage to manufacturing things that we can maximize on profit, right? But in the context of national security, everyone wants everything. Everyone wants maybe that's almost like assuming to the economy to make sure that I can is independent. Well, at least it can be independent. That's sort of the focus on the economy. When we look at this factor, like in my classmates at school, we're looking at the large operations. Shanghai, some are foreign semiconductor operations. You say why, when you ask them why it's so hard, it starts up, they would say the ecosystem that is out there is given that company is so much effort, there's so much energy, and the people have moving to become business. There's a lot of like niche company that out there, like business supplier for testing equipment of semiconductor things. So maybe it used to be a very small company. They come up with good enough products for that industry. And then we will say it will last 2 decades, and we will say, why would we go with this? Not as good as Japan, Japanese stuff. Actually, service not so great. Yeah. And for those guys, right, they're feeling like it's such a low volume with this. Maybe I should do something else. So they shut down that kind of business. So you now have those kind of. So the real economy probably means you will go into the different sectors and try to be self-sufficient for the whole supply chain. So that's like everyone has everything. So it's in some way it accelerates. Okay, please.
My name is Conal Doyle with the Cambridge Institute, and we're involved with a fair amount of work with the Department of Defense. And I heard the word offensive program there. About 8 years ago, the United States was working very much to help cooperate with the World Trade Organization to move chip production to China. However, we found ourselves with a serious problem that what China started to use or show their progress in the development of chips. We had a very serious incident with 2 destroyers that lost their navigation systems and resulted in major crashes. So subsequent to that, President Trump went on, had to go on a very offensive program to replace all the chips in all of our major weapon systems by virtue of the insecurity created by having chips manufactured in China. So when we look at your program today, and say it's an offensive move, I look at it as being far more defensive on the part of the United States. And this is just the next offensive as to how China could really try to the chip market.
Yeah, then from the kind of the CHIPS Act, and
Yeah.
also a year ago, this passed Innovation Act or something, right?
Yeah,
Over it's kind of more proactively, we try to guide capital into the different industries, right, to promote innovation in defense, right?
Right.
Do you see that kind of efforts be effective, or maybe will be very good the EU effort with a lot of thought?
ideally, I'd love to see a change in the attitude of the Chinese government to protect technologies and methods so we can cooperate and we can have a much more peaceful situation rather than find ourselves in a competitive situation to destabilize the situation. So I'd rather see it.
That's why I went to law school. My undergrad was technical advisor, right? It was a tough to and it's probably remember 1994. US and China had this dispute about protection of the IC circuits design. IC circuit design, and it is treated as to copyright protection. Like I don't see the thing. So I decided to go the top student. Decided to learn law school. I thought I would be the first generation patent lawyer in China.
Right.
But of course, I went to law school. Now I went to my classmate, former classmates, so then they are vendors, automated software of Microsoft. I said, forget about that. Time for office. So 20 years later, it's slightly different. So for both, they are innovation houses. So I fully agree. The patent law that both sides they can compete on. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Winston, for the great talk. Thank you everyone for joining us today. What just they will hear about next time.